Hey, many of you have been watching what's going on with Project Veritas, and it's a hard thing to know when you see the left destroying something. We expect that, but then when you see the right joining in, that makes things a little bit harder. We're going to talk today about what's going on with Project Veritas and some other things as well. Before we get into introducing our guest who has the inside scoop on all of that, I just want to remind you all, go to ourwatch.com, subscribe, become a watchman. We want to make sure that you get the truth, and the best way to do that is to become a subscriber, because as you know, most of the social media platforms do not want us sharing the truth with you. We get shadow banned, we get banned, we get all sorts of nonsense that way. So best thing to do to make sure that you're up to speed on everything going on, go to ourwatch.com, become a subscriber there. We'd love to have you there. Also, if you like this video, please share it out with your friends, your family, your neighbors. Make sure that they are well-informed citizens. All right, that being said, I want to welcome to our program today Christian Hartsock. Christian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with Project Veritas.
Well, it goes back 14 years. I had recently graduated film school up in Ventura, and I had moved down to LA where I was networking, and I happened to, the two stories kind of came together coincidentally. I had become friends with Andrew Breitbart through a secret society of pro-freedom people in the entertainment industry called Friends of Abe. It's no longer a secret. So he and I started becoming pretty close friends. And erstwhile, a mutual acquaintance sent James O'Keefe. This was in 2008, early 2009s, before Acorn. But a mutual acquaintance sent James O'Keefe the trailer for my thesis film, and James saw it, and he was very impressed by the production values, and he reached out to me, and he said, hey, let's get on a call and talk about some video ideas I have. I want to hear your ideas. And he was back east. So James and I, before we even met in person, we started having like quarterly phone calls for a couple hours at a time just to swap ideas. And one of his ideas was an idea that had come from a girl called Hannah Giles, a 20-year-old girl from Florida. And that was to go into Acorn offices. At the time, President Obama had just been inaugurated, and he was formerly an attorney for Acorn. And Acorn was this leftist housing organization that had come, under suspicion from on the right for a lot of shady shenanigans, like voter fraud, voter registration fraud, all sorts of stuff, helping precipitate the 2009 housing meltdown. Anyway, they had their roots back in the Chicago Obama and 80s, Chicago 70s and 80s scene, the Bob Creamers, the Saul Alinskys, the Midwest Academy. Anyway, James O'Keefe and Hannah Giles, they went into these Acorn offices pretending to be a pimp and a prostitute who needed housing assistance to set up a brothel for 14, 15, 16-year-old El Salvadoran sex slaves. And the Acorn officials were like, okay, so you want to list them as dependents, and don't say prostitution, say performing arts, on your application forms to set up the brothel. So anyway, James brought that tape to those tapes to Andrew Breitbart. Yeah. Andrew couldn't believe his eyes, and he launched biggovernment.com with the Acorn undercover tapes. And I had a limited role in that. James sent me down to Huntington Beach before August 2009. Said, "Can you meet up with this girl Hannah Giles? She's going to be dressed as a prostitute. Just get B-roll interstitial footage of her strutting her stuff on the pier." And so I did that, and that was in a couple. My footage showed up in a couple of the Acorn videos. Meanwhile, I'm doing film projects. I'm doing some producing for Kelsey Grammer's Right Network, which was co-founded by David Jaggett and Kelsey Grammer. It was a right-of-center entertainment platform, and I start trying out this undercover technique that I learned from James, that James and Hannah basically pioneered. They didn't pioneer undercover journalism, but as a brand, undercover video journalism is something that had never been institutionalized and developed into a single brand. So I started trying that out and running into Andrew Breitbart wherever I went. At one point, I went to Chris Burgard, my mentor at Right Network, sent me down to Palm Springs, where it was the Citizens United ruling had just passed, and you had all these this all-white rally. This was 2 years into the Tea Party, where all the big networks were calling Tea Partiers racist, and it was also 2 weeks after the Tucson shooting, when everyone was blaming Sarah Palin and saying violent racist rhetoric is what led to the shooting of Gabby Giffords. I spent 2 hours at this all-white, left-wing, anti-Citizens United protest in Palm Springs with and I go up to people with an Obama t-shirt and I say, what do we do with a handheld camera, by the way? This was back in the day when you can use a handheld camera. You didn't have to, and just a friendly face and an Obama t-shirt, and people will tell you whatever you want. And I said, what do we do with Clarence Thomas after we impeach him? And they said, string him up, put him back in the fields, string up Jenny too, hang him, all these remarks. So I found in that 2 hour period what the mainstream media, the Democrat media complex, had been trying to find for 2 years in the Tea Party without finding anything. And so we released those tapes. That was my first time trying my hand at undercover stuff. And then I started working for Andrew Breitbart. Andrew died. I was the last to see him in the office the night he died. And then shortly thereafter, I went back into doing film production stuff, and then ultimately joined James. I had been working with James as a contractor all those years, but in 2015 I started working full-time for Project Veritas, became one of the leaders, and broke a number of stories and helped journalists, helped train journalists, did a lot of confrontations on camera, did a lot of undercover work. Some of the work you might know about is I got Van Jones telling me the Russia thing was a big nothing burger. The Clinton's secret operation to incite violence at Trump rallies during the 2016 campaign. Jen Janai, the head of Google Machine Learning Fairness, telling me about how Google is in 2019 about how the Google is manipulating algorithms to prevent another Trump situation. So those were some of my big highlights, and I also helped recruit and train the journalists that helped make Project Veritas do the actual undercover journalism that was the brand of Project Veritas that James had pioneered.
So now here we are in this situation where we've seen a lot happen with Project Veritas, and it's frustrating on my end as a person who would tune in and watch. It's a frustration for me to see what has happened. But you were on the inside, and you know how these things take place. How was it for you going through that?
Well, so tell me what your perception of it was, what it seemed like to you from the outside.
Yeah, from the outside looking in, to me it just seemed like there was somebody who must have gotten in and got some infighting going on, stirring the pot. And obviously I'm a pastor. I come from a Christian perspective, and I see a great value in Project Veritas and what they accomplished, everything that you guys as a team accomplished. I see it from the biblical perspective. Ephesians 5:11 says we're to take no part in wicked deeds done in darkness, rather we expose them. So when I see somebody like Project Veritas exposing the wicked deeds done in darkness, I put a high value on an organization like that. So I also know that from the very beginning, when you have Adam and Eve walking around naked in a garden, experiencing joy and peace and walking with the Lord, that there was a division that was caused. The serpent came in and got the woman away, and when you divide people, you can conquer. So divide and conquer has been a trick of the enemy. And when I say the enemy, I'm talking about Satan. It's been a trick of the enemy since the very beginning. So it looked to me as though somebody got in, caused a division, and it looked like a hostile takeover.
Yes.
So that was my perspective, is like, there's a hostile takeover. Somebody's trying to divide and conquer, and they're going to ruin a very, very good thing. That was my perspective.
Right. Yeah. And that was the prevailing perception on the right and on Twitter. And it was very ingeniously manufactured. Look, no one has been a closer, more loyal friend to James O'Keefe than I have, who's not blood related to him. For 14 years, I still consider myself his friend. Andrew Breitbart used to warn me about the yes men, the sycophants, the clout chasers, the climbers, and to help protect James from these people who did not care about him, did not love him, and were willing to say whatever they felt they needed to say in order to maintain their clout with him. What happened was, the fact is, no one wanted him gone. No one wanted him gone. No one wanted him gone. The board members did not want him gone. Matt Tierman did not want him gone. There was no ouster. There was no Pfizer conspiracy. There were issues that had been building up that the board wanted to address, that employees had been wanting to address. And so the board intervened. What happened was the CFO had been raising issues with some of the spending. We were a 501c3. We were answerable to the IRS. The IRS obviously hates us. They'll look for any opportunity to shut us down. They're breathing down our necks, and we have to cross our T's and dot our I's, right? And so the CFO had concerns that he was perennially kind of bringing to the CEO's attention, and the CEO fired him. There was a big explosive meeting in, I think, late January or early February. It was a development meeting. There was a big blow up, a lot of disagreements. James fired the CFO, locked him out of the networks, also fired the chief strategy officer because there was strong disagreement about fundraising strategies. And that's when the board had to intervene, because they were like, well, wait, we appointed the CFO just as we technically appointed the CEO. The CEO cannot fire a board-appointed CFO, at least without a board buy-in. There was a claim that there was a board buy-in. The COO followed up on that claim. There was no board buy-in to fire the CFO, so the board had to step in and say, James, you can't do that. Only we can fire him. You can't tell people that you had a board buy-in when you didn't. So there was that, and there was also an accumulation of complaints from the staff as to how they were being treated. It's my understanding it's illegal to operate a hostile work environment in the state of New York. I could be wrong, but that was a liability issue. All the board members who were unpaid are personally liable for employee treatment, for potential financial malfeasance. They were obligated to have a meeting and reinforce already existing guardrails and make sure that the CEO was operating within those guidelines.
Right.
There was supposed to be, so there was a 6-hour board meeting in which employees testified and I listened to that board meeting, and every single testimony was sandwiched very gingerly with, James, we love you. We want to continue to work for you. We are dedicated to you, to the mission. But XYZ, but I can't be treated this way. This So after that meeting, which has in retrospectively been cast as a crucifixion, I listened to it. It was not a crucifixion. It was a bunch of people who were hurt and hurting and had been afraid of voicing their concerns, and now we're finally in a protected place where they knew that they had assurance that they would not be retaliated against, where they could voice it. there was going to be a follow-up meeting that Thursday, I believe, to discuss the financial issues. James did not show up at that meeting. By such time, someone had leaked, and I put leaked in air quotes because it was not true, that James had been ousted. The board of directors had ousted James O'Keefe. And so, of course, this was a week after one of our biggest releases, if not our biggest release ever, which was the Pfizer, where we had an undercover journalist exposed on a date with a Pfizer employee. The Pfizer employee told him about the directed evolution, which was essentially continued gain-of-function research that Pfizer was planning on mutating the COVID-19 coronavirus. Anyway, that was a huge story, and we were banned on YouTube. I went up to Silicon Valley, confronted the head of global affairs at YouTube over it. We were all very amped, and even Matt Tiermond was going on Twitter Spaces saying this is the greatest story in the history of Western civilization. 1 week later, all this stuff happens: the firing of the CFO, the board intervention, and so. And no one wanted. This was supposed to be quietly dealt with. The measures that were taken were, okay, we have to investigate some of the financial concerns, so we're going to temporarily freeze your company credit card temporarily while we investigate that, pending an audit, because it's better that we do an internal audit than an IRS audit, right? So the measures were put in place really to protect James O'Keefe and also to protect their own liabilities and to protect the staff. But it was going to be done quietly. There was also a temporary freeze on hiring and firing to protect employees who had testified. Word got out to Twitter that James O'Keefe had been ousted. And so, of course, the immediate speculation was clearly Pfizer bought off the board of directors. And yeah, Matt Tiermond, who just a week ago was calling this the greatest story in the history, loudly promoting it, is now suddenly bought off by Pfizer. Oh, you've gone too far, James. This time you've gone too far. Like, what? It didn't make sense. But it was attractive. Everyone was thinking. Everyone on the right was repeating it. Oh, Pfizer bought off PV. James was ousted. You say it enough times, and it becomes essentially true, right? Russia took over the United States. Trump is a Russian stooge. You say it enough. Trump is a racist. Trump is, you say it enough times, it becomes true. And if you question it, right. So. Anyway, a lot of innocent, good, decent people got dragged through the mud. And this is the exact thing that we existed to fight against. Right. This is exactly what, so it was essentially became within the right-wing echo chamber a popular mainstream talking point. James was ousted. No James, no PV. So I don't know. I guess that there seemed to be a very safe wave to ride out on for James, and he didn't show up. He didn't talk to any of. He talked to some of it, but he didn't talk to the staff. Our COO Dan Strack was trying to get him to talk to the staff. He went dark for a couple weeks, and then fast forward to President's Day, it was President's Day. Which was James was put on a 2-week paid leave, and on the final day of that leave, he comes into HQ, summons a bunch of staffers, and this was on a holiday, and the office was closed. But he comes in and films a 44-minute farewell speech, which was initially called James' resignation video on the Vimeo. It was quietly changed to James' farewell address, because I guess someone figured out, oh, well, we can't say he was ousted and say he resigned. Anyway, he gives this speech talking about, you can watch it. He plugs it on interviews, so you can watch it. It was a very interesting speech. And essentially saying, reinforcing the narrative that he was ousted, which was not true. he continued to be an employee until May 15th. For another over 3 months, he remained an employee of Project Veritas. Project Veritas was paying his medical benefits, covering his legal fees, and didn't want him gone, didn't fire him. No one wanted him gone. They were waiting for him to come back. And then he formed AMGA, a competing organization. A number of journalists that had previously worked for PV apparently felt the peer pressure. And what boggles my mind is we literally spend as undercover journalists, and I train them to do this, to spend months at a time developing aliases, building rapport with subjects, to infiltrate corrupted organizations from the outside.
Yeah.
If Project Veritas was corrupted by Pfizer, if a bunch of the Goldman Sachs and the suits had come in and said, James, you've gone too far now, wearing this, skeleton costumes, chasing the Karate Kid out of the gymnasium. Okay, well, then let's stay in the gymnasium and infiltrate. Or we don't need to infiltrate. We're already on the inside.
Right.
Okay, so we're already trusted in our actual names. If there was a coup here, let's get to the bottom of it. Why would you walk away from when we spend millions of dollars trying to infiltrate corrupted organizations from the outside when we're already in the, so that just doesn't, so to me, if you actually thought this was a coup and you're a journalist with Project Veritas, then that is a dereliction of duty to walk out on Project Veritas. If you don't think it's a coup, then that's even more so that's also a dereliction of duty to walk out on your friends and on and basically renounce your fidelity to the truth, no matter how unpopular it is, even amongst our audience. The truth.
So why do you think he did it? Because he did. He walked out. So why do you think?
Well, when you have a zombie apocalypse on Twitter, calling you a martyr, calling you a victim, and saying and reaffirming you, and saying you did nothing wrong, it seems a lot easier. I mean, I don't envy being in that position. I wouldn't want to be tempted like that. But I can imagine the temptation to, a red carpet's being rolled out for you out the door. You can either stay with Project Veritas and say, okay, guys, here's what happened. There was no Pfizer coup. I was not ousted. The truth is the truth. Well, that would have been, I don't know, a very possibly, it would have been humiliating to do that, I guess. And meanwhile, you have this, this shouting mob saying, like cheering you on and reaffirming you and validating you. Why would you not want to go in that direction? I don't know. But the fact is, we all signed up for this job to get the truth to the American people, and we've been pilloried for the last 14 years by the Democrat media complex.
Right.
James himself has had his door broken down by the FBI over a story he chose not to publish, that we never even published, the Ashley Biden diary.
Right.
Spencer Meads, Eric Cochran. I mean, the enormous pressure that we faced, for 14 years from the institutional left, from the powers that be, now, I don't know. For the following 6 months, we now had to face that from the right. Every single person who stayed with Project Veritas. And one thing I've said recently is that the resilience, the bravery, the moral courage that I saw in amongst the journalists, the producers, the leaders, James Lalino, Callan Erickson, the people who stayed with Pam Brown, Dan Strack, Eric Spracklin, the people who stayed with Project Veritas, Mario Bavilan, and even though we were being torn limb from limb by our former audience, the fact that that those people stayed and said, we have a job to do, and they continued to break story after story after story. We exposed pedophiles. We exposed groomers at schools. Mm-hmm. James Lalino was part of an investigation that he led, and he led pretty much all the investigations. One of the investigations was medical professionals admitting that they're transitioning kids as young as 8 years old. 8-year-olds, dude.
Yeah, I know, it's unreal.
And we released this tape, and comment after comment on YouTube. Where's James? Don't care. Where's James? It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Were you guys ever a fan of us for our undercover video content or for the fame of our founder?
Right.
And this was a moment where it's like, wow, we started this thing in the midst of the cult of personality of the first year of the Obama presidency. And now what have we become as a movement? If we're literally exposed, we're doing the same investigative journalists, the same team of investigative journalists. In fact, the best team, the whittled down, to the best team that was so committed to the truth and to doing their jobs that they didn't give into peer pressure. They refused to be gaslit. They didn't, walk out on their friends, and they stayed to do the job. In fact, it's the best team that we ever had. Continuing to give, the same journalists, James Lalino, the same people who were doing the stories that everyone said they were fans of us for, continuing to do the work. Now you're saying it doesn't matter because of the person introducing the video, the person narrating the video. And that's not to belittle what James did. James created this organization. Sure. I mean, James pioneered this tradecraft. James is the only person who actually took, we had investigative journalists before, we had undercover journalists before, but the one person who actually created a tradecraft out of this and institutionalized it, got the money, so that's not to belittle but the fact is the undercover journalism was being done by the undercover journalists, continued to be even after James walked out on the company, yet we're being attacked and called traitors, and so it was a very rough 6 months. And then I haven't even said anything about Hannah Giles yet.
I'm sorry, about what?
Hannah Giles.
Oh, okay. Well, let's get to that in just a second. But again, the pastor in me just has to speak out to this. Jesus says that he's the way, he's the truth, and he's the life. And I don't know where you are on your faith or if you're a man of faith at all, but I can tell you this. I firmly believe that Jesus is the truth. And when you walk in the truth, you're walking in the path that he's going to want you in, because he's the truth. And what he told us in Matthew chapter 5 is that we are blessed when people revile us and persecute us and say all manner of wickedness against us falsely for his name's sake. And that is a thing that I've had to walk in, that verse right there, that I'm blessed when people say these wicked things about me, when they call me the racist, bigot, homophobe, transphobe, xenophobe, you name it. I get called those names, and I just have to rest in God's word that I know that I'm doing what I'm doing for his name's sake. He is the truth. I'm going to walk in the truth, and people can say whatever they want. It hurts more when I hear it from people who are supposed to be on my side. There's no doubt. It hurts a lot worse from them, but we're going to get it from both sides. So I want to encourage you and the other journalists that you're talking about that stood the course. I want to encourage them. Stay the course. Walk in the truth. Shed light on these things. Do what you know you're supposed to do, and let people say whatever they're going to say. But at the end of the day, and at the end of our lives, we can stand before God knowing we walked in the truth. So let me encourage you in that, and then go ahead. Let's move on if you want to.
So over the and I think that is the spirit that was animating the journalists that continued with Project Veritas. And we continued to break stories. Bobby Harr, exposed the Mayor Adams, busing migrants to Westchester and outside of New York City and putting them up in hotels, and the cronyism that happened with that deal. Alyssa Dean exposed the Biden administration's backup plan to circumvent the Supreme Court's ruling against their student loan plan. James Lalino exposed these groomers with the groomers, but also actual like admitted pedophiles with Mike Villani, and continued to get the same reaction. And people were saying, well, yeah, you need a face, though. You need a face. That's what you're missing, a face. Okay, so we thought it was a brilliant idea to, get one of the original gangsters of that helped pioneer this movement, the person who actually conceived of the Acorn video, which was Hannah Giles. She had gone, she had kind of disappeared and retreated into private life over the last decade. So we brought her out of the woodwork. The idea wasn't for her to be CEO originally, but it was for her to be basically, to bring her skill set, her ingenuity, her and her face to, and she came in saying she had her own private personal donor network she was going to bring to the table. She had sources and high up in military and law enforcement and military intelligence that she was going to bring to the table. And she was going to do a media tour and defend Project Veritas against the popular lies that have been mounted against us. That's not exactly what happened. That personal donor network that she claimed to had, I don't know. They kept suddenly they had a wish list that seemed to coincide with everything she wanted. Whether it was, the donors aren't going to give to us until Matt Tierman's gone. Okay, Matt Tierman's gone. Now what? Oh, they're not gonna give to us until we get out of the Connecticut lease. Okay, we're out of the Connecticut lease. Oh, they're not going to give to us until other employees at the staff stop asking me questions that I don't have answers to. Okay, she fires them. Now what? Oh, well, Matt Tierman's going around telling donors not to donate to us. Oh, yeah, that's not true. So it turned out to be a con job. I hate to put it that way. I wish there was a more artful way to put it. But the fact is, and she started boxing people out, our best people. Eric Spracklin, Mario Bavalan, Tom O'Hara, Dan Strack. Dan Strack was basically the captain through the darkest parts of the storm during February, and he was being torn limb from limb on Twitter, being called, a Goldman Sachs suit, being blamed for the ouster and all that. And she boxed him out. She basically boxed out. And ultimately, when I started asking questions, boxed me out. And I was allegedly her friend for 14 years. So, so ultimately she got rid of everyone, brought in a few of her friends, and the 501c3 still exists. I don't know for what purpose, but Project Veritas technically is still a she suspended operations. But yeah, I mean, it basically the last 6 months, it's a miracle that we were able to continue putting out story after story. It was really in spite of Hannah Giles we were able to do that, and also in spite of this hate storm that we were facing. But the fact is, we got into this business not to be liked, not to be adored, either by the right or the left. We got into the business to expose the truth, to do journalism, to report stories that were matters of public interest, and we continued to do that. And the journalists that stayed, the crew that stayed with Project Veritas, did that against immeasurable odds. We've been doing this for 14 years against immeasurable odds. This was a new animal the last 6 months, where you're not even going to be you're going to be called a traitor if you go on camera, if you expose this. And they did it anyway, and that is courage.
So what's next for them?
Well, there's a big diaspora. Hannah had the HR director lay off about 20 of us over Zoom.
Wow.
Unexpectedly, while in the midst of saying that she was having great calls with donors. But we're kind of the scattered tribes now. But we stick together. We all talk every day, and everyone is everyone not everyone has found a job yet, but everyone is still has that fire in their belly to expose the truth. I encourage you guys to follow Bobby Harr on Twitter. He's been doing some remarkable journalism and exposing the homeless crisis. Follow James Lalino. Follow Alyssa Dean. Follow Eric Spracklin. Wish I could, but maybe I can give you the names to follow afterwards. But
yeah, give us a list. We'll put it in the comment section so people can find it.
Yeah, in my 14 years with Project Veritas, this is the greatest team that I ever worked with, and we went through many generations of staffs, and this was the best one.
So what's next for you?
Well, stay tuned. You can follow me on Chris_Hartsock on Twitter, Christian Hartsock on Instagram. I'm not going to give away everything or anything yet, but stay tuned, and we're very excited about this new horizon, this new frontier.
Yeah, again, pastor's coming out in me, but I say this: what Satan means for evil, God will use for good. What seems to be a nightmare right now for many of you, I'm sure you'll look back on it and go, man, I'm so glad God let me go through that. As difficult as it is. And it's those things, it's like getting to the gym. You get in there, you tear up your muscles, you're exhausting yourself, but at the end of that time, you're stronger. And so just know that the enemy's coming after you guys, but it's because you're exposing the truth. And if it's a part of what God has created you to do, God's going to make a way for you to continue doing that. So again, Christian Hartsock, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to put in the comment section a way people can connect with you, follow what you're doing. As you said, stay tuned. So we will stay tuned for sure, and very excited to see what God does in your life. So thank you so much. And I just want to thank you all for joining us. Once again, go to ourwatch.com, subscribe there. If you like this video, share it with your friends, your family, your neighbors, and we've got more coming up. So stay tuned with Our Watch as well. We'll see you next time right here on Our Watch with Tim Thompson.